So what does that mean? It means that for most of your life, until you get to the point where you are in charge of the environment or the system, you're going to have to somewhat thrive within the set of structure or rules that the system provides to you. Unfortunately, that's going to be the case for some people, because you have to realize that if you belong to an organization or a system, you're one of many often, right? So, for example, you go into school, you're in a classroom of 30 people, or you go into a team, you're in a team of, let's just say, 12 to 15. You're one of many. And so, to expect the leadership to always, maybe in some cases they might be able to, but to always be able to mold the environment and the system to your needs or your standards or your abilities is somewhat unreasonable. And I think, well, during my time in the NCAA, I saw this often. Players were signed to go to a team. Maybe they were from Europe. Maybe they grew up in a different system or environment. And I saw this a lot. A lot of the freshmen that struggled to be successful in the NCAA came in with a mentality of, well, this isn't the way I used to do it. Or with a mentality of, they should treat us all like individuals. And maybe they're right. Maybe they're wrong. That's beyond the point. The reality which they have to face is that they're in now an environment where that's not being done, right? Maybe they're in an environment where the head coach isn't very individualistic or doesn't do it the way that they used to do it prior to or before. I just think this is a very common theme behind unsuccessful first years, for example, in the NCAA. They come in and they're too frustrated by the way the organization in the system is, and the successful ones accept the way the organization or the system is and learn to thrive within it. And I always give this example of, for some of you, maybe you might know Tom Brady, who is known as the greatest football player of all time. He figured out a way to win a Super Bowl with the New England Patriots and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I think that great athletes do that. They find a way to be successful no matter the environment. And certainly in order to do that, that requires them to not spend, or to spend as little time as possible complaining or wishing the environment was different. So this is really important to capture into your performance identity. I am someone who thrives within any environment I'm put into. That is an elite performer. That's the mindset of an elite performer. Whatever you put in front of me, whatever stipulations you put in front of me, whatever environment you put me in, I will not spend any time wishing it was a different stipulation or environment. I will spend all my time learning and figuring out how to thrive within that. So now we can look at this in another example or analogy. Let's say we do a drill, okay? And we say, you're only allowed to serve and volley. And we're going to play for 17. Well, let's say you're not a great serve and volleyer. Let's say you don't have a great server, you don't have a great net game. And now you got to play for a 17. And I got to play against somebody, let's just say, that is a better server and volleyer. Well, the game is somewhat set up to favor the opponent then. And some players will say, this is so unfair. Or they might not say it, they might not verbalize it, but they can see it in their motivation to be successful within the drill or their attitude. It would be a great practice to be faced with a disadvantage, yet to treat it and approach it as if you were advantaged within it. Meaning the player opposed from you, who does have the great serve and volleyer, is probably thrilled and excited and loves this game. So skill set aside, who has the better mentality? certainly the one who's enthused about the way the game is set up. And so now not only are they stronger in their abilities, but they're also had an advantage psychologically. If you are provided with a set of rules or a structure that doesn't favor you, how do you compensate for that? You need to take on the appropriate psychological approach. Going back to, we spoke a little bit about Viktor Frankl, the famous psychiatrist. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he spoke about this. He said, everybody has the opportunity to respond to the situation in the way they want. That's the only thing they can control. We can't control what happens to us. We can control how we respond to what happens to us. Okay, and so transitioning into the second part of this point. If you want to be a part of the best environments or the best organizations or the most elite teams, they will have the highest standards, and it will be the hardest set of structure and rules. Everything will feel disadvantaged or unfair to you. At least that's been my observation and experience. That in the most elite environments or organizations, everything is so hard and feels so overwhelming and almost inaccomplishable. You have to get used to that feeling. And you have to understand that if you're in that position where you feel you're at a disadvantage, you're probably in a very opportunistic situation. You're probably very close to the treasure. So when it comes to performance, you should never in some ways use the word or the sentence, "That's not fair," or "I wish it was this way," or ask for change. Hey, can you make this a little bit more favored for me or easier for me? First, elite environments won't do that. They won't drop their standards for you. They'll expect you to raise your standards for them. And second, elite performers won't ask that. That's not a mental characteristic of them. They don't in some ways play the victim. They see the world as it is and they navigate it accordingly in the best possible way they can. Okay. Any thoughts on that? As I want to try to transition a little bit faster today.
Bad skin.
Yeah. So, like, if you want to optimize your motivation, it's important to understand not only do you need the love of winning, but you need the hate of losing. You need to integrate both. You need something to run away from and something to run towards. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Technically speaking, if you can integrate the both, that would be optimal. But of course, you may need to hyper focus on one at a certain period of your life. Like, to get started, you're closer to, when you're starting out with the goal, you're closer to the negative, losing in the first round, than the positive. So for example, like, let's say you're in a tournament structure and you're just beginning tennis. What you're commonly going to experience is first round losses. So this, at this point of your life, is closer to home. So you need to maybe at that point, instead of hyper focus on winning championships, you need to hyper focus on the fact of how much you hate losing in the first round, just to get yourself separated and farther away from that goal. And then as you start consistently making the semifinals, you might want to hyper focus more on the championships because it's closer to you. And when the goal is or what you're running towards or running from is closer to you, you're more likely to be more motivated from it. And this is, again, technically true from a dopaminergic standpoint. You have to understand this, that when runners are running races, they experience much more dopamine, which is the neurochemical for motivation, drive, and focus, as they get closer to the finish line than they do in the beginning. So as they get closer to the finish line, of course they're more tired, but from a neurochemical standpoint, they're more motivated than ever, which is why a lot of times people, certainly when I was at Indiana, I experienced this. I would sometimes run so fast at the very end because I was so close to the goal. So you, in some ways, want to determine what is the goal I'm closest to that I can use to increase my dopamine levels, which again is the neurochemical for motivation, ultimately, drive, focus, and motivation. I know it's a little bit complex, but again, like, guys, if you can really understand what we're talking about in here, my goodness, you would have such a psychological advantage and edge over your competitors. To be frank, are probably just super unaware and uninformed of the stuff we're discussing in here. Like, this could help you optimize your performance light years compared to what they're doing. Like right now, they're probably just, I don't know, who knows what they're doing, maybe watching Netflix stuff. Like, you guys are really trying to understand deep performance science. It's unbelievable. I know it's complicated and it's a little bit complex. You don't need to understand things perfectly, but at least we're introducing the ideas to you, and it's helping you guys think about things.